Welcome to Wealth Roadmap with Jeff and Steve, your guide to simplifying wealth management. Join us as we explore financial planning, taxes, investments, insurance, and legal frameworks to help you secure your financial future. Hey everyone, my name is Jeff Costello. Welcome to the Wealth Roadmap with Jeff and Steve. I believe we're on episode 6, maybe 7. It's been a long day, but we're here to talk about diversification. Before we get into all that and the S&P 500, Steve Benny was Googling icebreakers. So what do you got for us, Steve?
You know, I was just looking at a few different things.
Steve's got nothing.
The world's richest man, I guess right here, sues the world's biggest company for putting profits over the common good. It's a sentence that we never thought would actually write.
Yeah, that is an icebreaker for sure. We're going to talk today about the S&P 500.
Wait. Go ahead. We're good.
We're going to talk about the S&P 500, diversification, and asset classes, all that fun stuff. If you are on any type of social media or on the internet, you've probably been hearing all this stuff about the S&P 500. You probably have FOMO, fear of missing out on what is everyone talking about the S&P 500. Fear of missing out. That kind of reminds me of last week when Steve and I and a few friends went to Park City, Utah for a ski trip, went to a steakhouse, and 3 out of 4 people ordered a steak, but only one person did not. That was Steve Benny. And you could see it in his face. He had the fear of missing out. He missed out on a nice, juicy steak.
Context.
And if you're a vegan, listen to this. I have nothing else to tell you other than it was delicious.
You got to give context, though. All right, listen, I'm just trying to watch the cholesterol. I got some bad news. I got some blood work that came back. I'm going out with the boys to go skiing. Next thing you know, we decide to book steakhouse restaurants for each night. Each night. I said to myself, all right, you know what? Let me diversify. I say I'll diversify one night. I'll take some of the tuna. It was a special. It was delicious. It just wasn't really the right size. Too small. But listen, that's unfortunately what happens.
I like my cholesterol like I like my S&P 500 at all-time highs. All right. On the day of this recording, March 4th, for compliance, the S&P closed at 5137. Holy cow. We're at all-time highs with the S&P 500 and Steve's cholesterol, but we're not here to talk about Steve's cholesterol. So let's dive in, shall we, Steve?
Get ready.
So the S&P 500, first of all, what is it? It's an index measuring the performance of 500 widely held stocks in the U.S. equity market. Yes, I am reading off a script. Basically, the 500 largest stocks, and that's up, but it's going to be based off the market cap of those stocks within the S&P 500. If you're really not sure what it is, just go to Google, hit pause on this podcast, then come back. But let's dive in. So we're going to share our screen here. And no one panic. So for those of you that are watching, hopefully you can see this.
We got it.
Again, the S&P 500 closed at 5137 as of today, March 1st, 2024. So when you're listening to this, that number has probably changed. So what is the S&P 500? Again, 500 widely held stocks. There's my script. What we're going to talk about today is not just the good about the S&P 500, but also the bad. There's been a lot of talk, again, amongst people on social media, hey, put all your money in the S&P 500. And while it's done great recently, people forget about the 2000 to 2010 run that the S&P 500 had. Us in the biz, we like to call it the lost decade. So let's dive in.
Did you make that up, Jeff?
Sorry?
Did you make that up?
I did not make that up. Nope. There's zero originality on my end other than Steve's high cholesterol joke. So if we're looking at the S&P 500, from January 2000, and again, this is all information that you can find, January 2000 to January of 2010, that 10-year run, assuming you reinvested dividends, you had an annualized return of less than negative 1%, right? Or almost at negative 1%. So if you put in $100,000 in January of 2000, come January of 2010, you have a little less than that $100,000, right? You annualized, right, a total, negative 2.3%. So, and again, that's with dividends and whatnot. So you lost money over a 10-year run. So what is everyone talking about? Why would I want to invest in the S&P 500 when it was so bad from 2000 to 2010? And again, during that period of time, if you're a retiree or, you're building up wealth, whatever the case is, and you need to rely on that money for income and you're losing money, it's, kind of going back to our sequence of return risk podcast, you're going to have a tough time with that. What people remember is the next 10-year period from January 2010 now to January 2020, right? So right before COVID hit, you had a return of 11 to 13%, depending on, if you're reinvesting dividends. So it's looking pretty good. So yeah, it's like, well, yeah, who wouldn't want to get a 13.5% return every year? But that's just not the way that investing works, right? There's going to be times where one asset class is going to outperform the other. So whether you're investing in domestic U.S. stocks like the S&P 500, you're going to international, you're going to small cap, mid cap, whatever the case might be, there's going to be times where we can cherry pick certain dates and show you that hey, yeah, investing in the S&P 500, again, wasn't the greatest investment from 2000 to 2010. Now, again, the last few years when we're looking at performance, right? Annualized over the last 15 years, right? So again, going back to like that 2009 annualized, the S&P has done, almost 14% over the last 10 years, 10%. And if you've, been watching obviously the news, we're kind of coming back from that bear market. The moral of this podcast is the S&P 500 is great, but
Don't say it.
again, there's that lost decade, right? So again, while it's at all-time highs like Steve's cholesterol hasn't always been at all-time highs, right, Steve?
All right, you're taking it too far. My cholesterol's not that high, number one. Number two, borderline. The doc said I'll be all right. I diversify into some tuna. Next thing you know, we level out the returns. It's what diversification is all about. It's just levelizing out it's normalizing the levels. So great stuff, Jeff. I like what. Yeah, perfect. I was just gonna say. I'm gonna share another piece here. So you said FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. Fear and greed, the two biggest emotions. It's either and the fear could be fear of missing out, or the fear could just be not investing because you're fearful of the markets or fearful of the economy, and so as a result, you don't invest. Greed, on the other hand, right? You see markets going up, all-time highs, hitting new records. People are talking about it. Your friends, they're texting you, they're calling you. Hey, did you see that stock? Did you see this one? I'm making X amount of money. This is wonderful. What happens? Well, greed gets in the way, and so it's like, let me jump in. Let me invest in this. Let me invest in that. And I think you lose sight of really what we're trying to help portray here and give perspective. Where don't let that cloud your judgment when investing or when you're putting together plans. I'm going to populate here. You're going to see my screen in 2 seconds. The big thing, Jeff mentioned the lost decade. I'm going to share this for those of you who are viewing this. You'll be able to see this, but there we go here. Okay. We live with this? We got it. All right. This is the Callum periodic table of investment returns. Another thing you can Google. This is something that is easily found. What we like about it is that it's a snapshot over since and you could find different years, but this is from 2004 till the end of 2023. And what it just shows, and I'll scroll down so you can actually see, this is, as I said, something that you can find. It depicts the annual returns for 8 asset classes and cash equivalents. They rank from best to worst performance for each calendar year. Clearly, you can see that they're color-coded. Why? Well, it just makes it easier to track. And as you can see over time, what you'll see is that there is no pattern, right? There is absolutely no pattern. From one year to the next, there's no rhyme or reason for why different asset classes do better than the other. The lost decade, it's kind of not totally here, but you'll see kind of down here from 2004, right, roughly to 2010, you're not seeing that S&P 500. The S&P 500 is depicted with the large cap equity here. And again, you just can read this right here. Large cap equity, S&P 500, right? Small cap equity, Russell 2000, so forth and so on. You could, as I mentioned, you could Google this, or feel free to reach out. We could easily send you this PDF for you to review, so you have. But the whole point with this is that you really want to make sure that when you're investing, you have a plan to diversify. The whole point of diversification isn't necessarily to knock the cover off the ball. It's more so, again, going back to getting those levels normalized. You want to be able to have that diversification provide return with less risk. And that's the purpose. And don't get in a position where you're chasing returns or you're chasing last year's winner, because you'll see here with this chart, it's not going to turn out well. So that is, that more or less, when we say, you can't see this anymore, right, Jeff? I'm going to pop. Okay. So when we're looking at that, like that's what we want you to keep in mind. Whatever philosophy it is that you have when putting a plan together. And look, let me pause. If you want to go ahead and take a piece of some of the money that you have and get a little more aggressive, absolutely. You know what? Feel free to do it as you wish with a piece of the money that you have, that you've saved, that you've accumulated. But when looking at it from a standpoint of where all the assets that you own, make sure that the plan is there. Make sure that you're invested, because you don't want to be in a position where you don't put your money in the market and you miss out because you're fearful, or you end up putting your money in the market because markets are doing well, and the markets don't do well the next year. You end up having to pull your money out because you get scared, anxious, nervous, and you don't have that risk tolerance that you maybe should have looked at prior to making those investment decisions. Diversification, asset allocation, they're approaches to help manage that risk. They're not going to eliminate the risk of loss, right? But we have to understand, again, the asset class that performs best one year may not do so the next. When you diversify your holdings among several of these different investment types within these asset classes, well, then over time that you'll be able to get that return that you're hoping for without taking on as much risk that you would if you maybe just picked and choose different asset classes at will. Great example, Jeff. What did we look at last year? What we heard a lot, and when we're having conversations, and even right now, I shouldn't just say last year, it's current. Interest rates have went up. They went up high. You can find 4 or 5% return with putting money in the bank, putting money in a savings account or CD. And so that was attractive. We haven't seen that in a while. People were getting excited. People were nervous. If you remember the beginning of 2023, coming off of 2022, there was some hesitancy with getting back in the market, or just hesitancy with investing. So a lot of people have said, you know what? I'm just going to take the 4 or 5%, whatever that number is that they got, and I'm not going to invest. I'm just going to, it's too risky, don't want to do it. Well, look back in the year, Jeff, what did the S&P 500 do in 2023?
It was a 24.23 return calendar year.
So when does 5% risk out and losing 23.4%? It's when the return or the risk that you can take to get that return is going to outweigh obviously the risk that you are in cash. But that's where having a plan, diversifying, making sure that you do get in the market and get in there for the long run so that you're able to capture the returns that you have and that you're able
Yeah.
to get from being in the market.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of programs out there that will allow you to invest in the S&P 500 while, limiting some downside. We won't get into those today, but the issue I think that I see a lot is there's always something going on. It's either some countries fighting another country, there's some thing going on down in DC, some legislation just got changed. There's always something going on, but again, those items that I mentioned prior, those returns that we've seen, there was always something going on. There was always a debt ceiling. There was always, so and such is, such and such is happening, or someone's pulling out of a war, going into a war, but going back to like one of our fewer recent episodes of having a plan, investing, whether it's the S&P 500, mid cap, small cap, international, the idea is that to have a plan for the good times and for the bad. So yeah, if you're going to invest in the S&P or any type of portfolio and it's going to have a bad 10-year run, well, what's your plan? But like Steve mentioned, as you saw on that like periodic table, there's times where the large cap equity or S&P 500 has done the best, and there's times where it's, mediocre. And I always, bring it back to like, yeah, the S&P has done well, but it's hard to bet on last year's Super Bowl winner, right? So if you always bet on last year's Super Bowl winner, yeah, you might get it right here and there. But it's really tough to pinpoint which asset class is going to perform the best, but having some diversification helps you out.
Yeah, and that the S&P 500 in that periodic table of investments that we were just looking at, right? That is one of the 8 asset classes. So, to throw all your eggs in one basket, and I know people have made a lot of money investing, but that recency bias where, yeah, it's done well over the years, but if you kind of really look at it, will it continue? No one knows. And so the question becomes, what is next year's return going to be? Again, nobody knows. But what we do know is that the large cap, the S&P 500, is it's concentrated, as in you're really only investing in the 500 of the largest U.S. companies. And yeah, companies come in and out of the S&P 500. And here's the thing, let's caveat this and say, and asterisk this, we believe in the S&P 500. Absolutely believe in the S&P 500. But what we're just trying to illustrate is keep it in perspective. It's really one asset class out of the 8. And truly there could be arguments for that there are more asset classes from a standpoint of being able to diversify and having a portfolio and investment strategy that diversifies into many different asset classes. But the point that we're trying to make is the S&P 500 has, for the past 10 plus years, above average, probably even more actually, above average returns, above average historically. So that concept of reversion to the mean, meaning, will it come back? On average, it's about 9-10% S&P 500. So is it going to kind of pull back to that? And look, we don't know, but what we do know is in order to have that plan, that's where that diversification is going to be able to help give you that, smooth out those returns, lower that risk to be able to help you achieve really the goals that you want within whether it's a short-term, long-term, or medium.
So, Steve, I missed everything that you just said other than you ordering a tuna.
Listen, I got a lot of family and friends. It's a popular podcast. I don't want anyone to be nervous or upset. I am A-okay. It was just a slip. My doc said, listen, just give it another 3 months, come back, get some more blood work. I'm just taking precautions.
Hey, you're checking your blood every 3 months. The S&P 500 is rebalancing every 3 months. There's a lot of synergy here when it comes to the cholesterol and Steve's cholesterol and the S&P 500. But while we hope that Steve's cholesterol comes down. We're hoping that the S&P 500 continues to go up. But be sure to review your portfolio, making sure that you're rebalancing and making sure that you have a plan kind of going forward when it comes to your investments.
I like what I'm hearing from you, Jeff. I like what I'm hearing.
All right. Any icebreakers before we let everyone get to the rest of their day?
Nope. An icebreaker, I think by definition, is more so breaking the ice. That would be in the beginning of the podcast, which I think we did very elegantly. Thank you to me. But no, I think we're good to go.
All right. Well, everyone, if you're going to order steak, order it medium rare. Jeff's pro tip, get it with blue cheese on top. Everyone, have a fantastic day. Make it a good one. And we'll see you in the next episode.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed our podcast, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment on topics you'd like for us to cover on future episodes. We'll see you soon.
Financial planning and advisory services are offered through Prosperity Capital Advisors, PCA, an SEC-registered investment advisor with its principal place of business in the state of Ohio. One Team Financial LLC and PCA are separate, non-affiliated entities. PCA does not provide tax or legal advice. Insurance and tax services offered through One Team Financial LLC are not affiliated with PCA. Information received from this video should not be viewed as individual investment advice. Product discussions and illustrations are hypothetical in nature and will vary based on many factors, including but not limited to age, health, product, insurance carrier, and product design. You should consult the insurance carrier website and policy for detailed information. Content may have been created by a third party and was not written or created by a PCA-affiliated advisor and does not represent the views and opinions of PCA or its subsidiaries. For information pertaining to the registration status of PCA, please contact the firm or refer to the investment advisor public disclosure website. For additional information about PCA, including fees and services, send for our disclosure statement as set forth on Form ADV from PCA using the contact information herein. Please read the disclosure statement carefully before you invest or send money.